Hey everyone, would you expose this person publicly to warn others, or keep it private and handle it yourself? Comment expose or private and explain. Now let's dive into the story. Scene 1. Recalled to the room. My name's Helena Brooks. I used to work for ORPHEUS, a military-grade tech firm, where I built frameworks to stop AI systems from misreading field info. My dad, Marcus Brooks, was the CEO. He treated what I did like typing practice, always saying I wasn't mission capable. That was 3 years ago. A failed tech patch led to a drone misfire that killed people overseas, and I got the blame. My clearance got pulled, and my dad signed the report with my name on it, taking credit for the cleanup. We haven't spoken since. Now, I'm sitting 5 seats away from him in a secure government briefing room, dressed in civilian clothes, no title, just a consultant. The air in the room is thick with tension when a general walks in, doesn't greet anyone, and just says, "Need to verify something." Then, without missing a beat, he asks a question in an old compression language, one I used to teach AI to detect context. It's nearly obsolete now, but I can still read it. The room freezes. Analysts, engineers, no one answers. I do. "Your answer?" the general asks, his eyes narrowing. "Target signal analysis is corrupted. The decoder didn't apply context-based weight," I respond. He nods once, then says, "She's Orpheus." My father's face drains of color. He knows what that name means. It's not a good thing. It's the name they gave me after the tech failure. The room is quiet, but it feels like an explosion. The general's words cut through the silence. He's not looking at my father, but the weight of it's clear. I'm no longer just a consultant. I'm the reminder of what happened. And suddenly, I remember, justice doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in a room full of power. The general's words still hang in the air as I sit there, watching my father, who's now as pale as a ghost. He hasn't said a word since Orpheus came out of the general's mouth. It's a name he hates, a name he helped create. I lean back in my chair, my eyes on him. It's strange, being in this room with him after all these years, after everything that's happened. Growing up, my dad was a corporate god. He ran labs, patented tech, shook hands with defense contractors. I remember seeing him on TV sometimes, walking across a stage with a microphone in his hand, talking about the future. His face would be on the cover of magazines. It was like he owned the world. And I was the kid in the back, the one who kept to herself, scribbling code when I should have been outside playing sports like my dad always wanted. I started messing with coding languages when I was 10, building programs for the hell of it. At first, it was just puzzles, problems I wanted to solve. But then it clicked. I could make the machines listen. My mom, though, she noticed, she was a quiet woman, her body failing her from the inside out, but sharp as hell. I remember one night she whispered to me from her bed, her voice raspy from the pain. "Whoever understands machines before they break saves more lives than soldiers do." She believed it. I believe it too. But my dad? He didn't see it that way. To him, coding was just a hobby. I was just a girl who needed to get serious. "Play basketball or something," he'd say, waving me off, like I was wasting time. So I learned to hide what I built. By 13, I was teaching myself 6 machine languages, kept my notebooks hidden behind cleaning supplies. I remember crouching down in the closet, just me and the machines. They made sense to me in ways people didn't. I could fix them. I could talk to them. When my mom passed away when I was 14, that was when everything changed. My dad stopped talking to me altogether unless something was broken. Until then, there'd been an unspoken tension between us. But when she was gone, it turned into nothing. Just silence. At 18, I joined Arcasis, the lowest floor. Bug tickets, data checks, the stuff no one else wanted. I didn't care. It was a way in. I figured if I played the game, maybe he'd notice. Maybe he'd see me for once. By 24, I had written the anomaly filter that helped prevent rogue AI loops, the one that saved people's lives in ways no one would ever know. My dad? He never noticed. Or maybe he did and pretended not to. I'll never know. But it wasn't just the work. It was everything about him. His silence, his disregard. I learned a long time ago that in this world, it wasn't the loudest who got noticed. It was the ones who kept quiet, stayed invisible, and made things happen in the background, just like I had. But none of it mattered. Not to him. It never would. I don't remember much about the mission itself. It was routine. A low-risk software test embedded in a surveillance drone program. Jordan, a dusty, cluttered street market, and me sitting in the back of an armored vehicle, monitoring systems. My role was support only, nothing active. I wasn't supposed to do anything beyond making sure the system didn't malfunction. But then the kid ran into the street. He was no older than 10, holding something in his hands, his face twisted in a panic I recognized immediately. The AI's targeting system locked onto him in seconds, scanning his object, reading it as a threat object, small arms. Before the soldiers could do anything, their rifles trained on him, I heard it, a woman screaming in the local dialect, faint but clear. She was calling his name, pleading. I didn't think. I just acted. The command override wasn't supposed to be in my hands, but I had it. I activated the voice command sequence, one that wasn't part of my clearance, using a sequence from Deep Ops protocol I'd only ever used in simulations. My voice broke through the system's lock. Deactivate targeting sequence. The drones buzzed. The system hesitated for just a moment before executing. The kid's object wasn't a weapon. It was a radio, the kind you'd use to talk to someone from a distance. The boy ran off. There were no shots fired. No incident. I wasn't thanked. In the after-action review, the report was clear. No incident. That was it. No one questioned the AI's misread. No one acknowledged the fact that the targeting system had nearly caused a massacre. Later, someone, maybe an engineer, said I'd just gotten lucky. Lucky that the kid hadn't been carrying something more dangerous. Lucky that I'd been able to override the system in time. But that's when I realized something. Tech translation wasn't about the code. It wasn't about perfect algorithms or idealized processes. It was about timing. Timing and recognizing when the human element was needed to make the right call. And in that moment, when everyone else had frozen, I had been the one to act. Not because I had better tech, but because I understood how to listen to the right signal, even when the system didn't. I didn't need a thank you. I didn't need credit. But I knew then that the real work wasn't in building flawless systems. It was in knowing when they failed and stepping in before the mistake became irreversible. That was something they didn't teach at ORPHEUS, or anywhere else for that matter. The misfire happened during a high-stakes data relay operation. A simple misinterpretation, a line of code that was never corrected, and suddenly 7 Allied soldiers were dead. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. I flagged the anomaly in the data parsing right away, a phrase that could mean either retreat or strike, depending on the signal weight. My log said it needed human review. It wasn't a mistake. It was a judgment call. But when the version that got used came through, it had a simplified tag, green light. That wasn't mine. I knew the moment it hit the board that I was screwed. The review was a formality, really. The decision had already been made. My dad was there, sitting at the far end of the table, his face an emotionless mask. The engineers, the analysts, they all knew what had happened. They knew the version they used wasn't the one I flagged. When they asked about the final authorization, I knew what was coming. My dad's voice was steady, like it always was when he was in full corporate mode. Helena exceeded her scope, he said. She lacked field context. He lied. He knew it wasn't my version. But he let the silence stretch out, the weight of his words sinking into the room. He said nothing else. Didn't back me up. Didn't even blink. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. They suspended my access right after that. No rank, no badge, no voice. It was as if I never existed. The report was rewritten with my name on the blame line, and he signed it like it was nothing. He never called. Never asked me what happened. Never apologized. Just signed the damn thing. It was as if he was already done with me. I stopped calling him my father after that. I couldn't. He wasn't a father anymore. He was a stranger with the same last name. They pulled me out of Arcesis without so much as a goodbye. I sat in that sterile office for hours, not knowing what was worse, the failure or the fact that my own blood was willing to burn me for it. It didn't take long for me to realize that the company, the people I had worked for, didn't give a shit about what I had done. All they cared about was saving face. I was the scapegoat, and I didn't matter. And my dad? He had always been willing to sacrifice me for his own comfort. I couldn't change that. I couldn't even want to anymore. I left Arcesis without a plan. No job, no real future to speak of. Just a tight grip around my chest every time I thought about walking back into that world. So I did the only thing that made sense. I disappeared. Moved into a tiny basement apartment in Bethesda, the kind of place that smelled like mildew and regret. I spent a year there, barely speaking to anyone. I didn't need to. I just needed to not think about what had happened, what he had done. But silence has a way of getting louder, so after a while, I started looking for something to fill the emptiness. That's when I found the community center. It was small, rundown, and tucked between two empty storefronts. The sign out front read, "Free Education for Refugees." Inside, it smelled like old carpet and hope. They were looking for someone to teach basic coding to refugee teens. I signed up under the name Ms. Brooks. No one asked about my past, and I didn't volunteer any details. They just needed someone to show up. I taught them the basics: logic trees, syntax, the rules of structured code. It wasn't much, but it felt like something. Sometimes, when I was teaching them how to spot anomalies, I'd catch myself thinking about the ones I used to track. One day, a kid looked up from his laptop and said, "You explain it like you're trying to stop a mistake before it happens." I smiled. He wasn't wrong. Every algorithm I taught them, every piece of code I shared, was something I'd once used to stop a war that no one would ever know about. It wasn't the kind of thing you put on a resume. It wasn't the kind of thing that got you accolades or awards. It was just the kind of thing that changed lives in ways no one would ever see. And in that room, with those kids, it didn't matter that I'd once been part of something that nearly destroyed lives. Here, I was just someone who could teach them how to read a system, how to spot a flaw, how to make sure nothing went wrong. In a way, I was fixing things, one line of code at a time. It was a Tuesday. I was teaching a group of teens about recursive functions when my phone buzzed 4 times in under a minute. Unknown DC number. I didn't hesitate. I stepped outside into the fading afternoon light, the quiet of the neighborhood surrounding me. "Hello," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. A voice on the other end said 5 words in a sequence I hadn't heard in years. It was a line from an old data structure compression protocol, one I used to run during deep ops drills. The weight of it hit me before I even realized. "Helena Brooks, we need you." My heart skipped. Not Miss Brooks. Not a polite inquiry. Straight to the point. I didn't wait for the rest. "What's the problem?" I asked. "We have chatter with embedded anomalies we don't trust." I could feel the tension on the other end. They had the tech, the software, the people. Why were they calling me? I thought about Arceus, about the years I spent hiding. "You have hundreds of engineers," I said, voice flat. I didn't want to go back to that world. Didn't want to let them pull me back in. The voice paused, then replied, "We need ORPHEUS." The name hit like a slap. ORPHEUS, the name they gave me after the drone misfire, the name that everyone had quietly associated with failure. Only you caught the drift pattern in the Enceladus breach. Enceladus. I'd tracked that breach back when it happened. A subtle data pattern that had been overlooked by everyone else. The kind of thing that got buried in a stack of endless reports. But I saw it. I caught it. No one else did. I didn't ask why they were calling now. I didn't ask why they needed me when I knew damn well I wasn't part of their system anymore. I just said, "I'll be there." There was a beat of silence, and then the voice said, "We're sending a car." I hung up before they could say anything else, feeling the pull of it. The call, the name, ORPHEUS. It was like stepping back into a world I'd promised myself I was done with. But the truth was, I never really left it. It was still inside me, every line of code, every algorithm still waiting. I didn't even look back as I stepped inside, gathered my things, and left the community center behind. They brought me in through the service entrance, past the back halls where I'd once walked without a second thought. The elevator was quiet as it climbed, the hum of its old machinery filling the space between us. When the doors opened, I was hit with that sterile, familiar smell, the one that always lingered in the tech control war room. And there he was, my father, seated at the far end of the table, in his full suit, the same tight expression he'd always worn in boardrooms. His eyes didn't meet mine, but I felt them. That weight, the judgment. I didn't hesitate. I sat down right next to him. I needed to stay focused, and I wasn't going to let him throw me off this time. He leaned over, his voice low but sharp. "Still playing with your little toys?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. What was there to say? The words I wanted to throw at him were 1,000 miles away. Words I knew wouldn't change anything. Not now. The briefing started. They pulled up the satellite uplink data. Strange code, encrypted commands hidden inside visual data. It didn't make sense. Everyone in the room was scratching their heads, flipping through notes and logs, trying to decipher what was happening. They needed me. They needed someone who could read between the lines. Someone who knew how to spot intention in a sea of data. Finally, they turned to me. "Helena, what's your read?" I stared at the screen. The data looked almost normal at first glance, just a jumble of code and transmissions. But then, there it was. One misplaced directive buried in the noise. I had seen it before. "It's not metaphor," I said, pointing to the line that caught my eye. "It's a command. Deactivate remote visual." The room went still, the kind of stillness that only happens when someone's pointed out something that shouldn't have been missed. And then I turned to him, my father, the man who had been silent through the whole thing. His face had gone pale. He knew exactly what I was talking about. He knew that phrase. He had used it before. "You'd recognize that phrasing, wouldn't you?" I asked him, my voice calm, but carrying more weight than I ever intended. He didn't answer. He couldn't. The silence stretched on, and I could feel the eyes of the room shift between us. Whatever connection we had left, whatever thread held us together, snapped in that moment. He wasn't just the CEO anymore. He wasn't just the man who'd pulled me down when I'd fallen. He was the person whose decisions were coming back to haunt us both. I knew the truth. He knew it too. And for once, I wasn't going to let him hide behind silence. Not today. After the briefing, the lead general slid a file across the table to me. It had no label, just a series of time-stamped logs printed on the front page. No context, no explanation, just paper. I didn't need any. I knew exactly what it meant. I flipped through the pages quickly. The first log was a communication from the field, a simple message, at least at first glance. But as I read it, something caught my eye. The wording wasn't right. The original message had flagged a significant threat, a hostile force approaching the team. But what I was looking at was a sanitized version, a translation that had been altered to make it seem peaceful. I didn't need to read further. I knew what had happened. I ran a quick trace on the digital fingerprint of the log. There it was, the override key. My father's. I could spot it from a mile away, the same authorization pass he'd used for years. It was the kind of thing you didn't forget, not after seeing it 100 times, not after living in that world. It had been used 2 hours before the drone strike, the one that killed 7 allies and 2 locals, 7 people, 2 families who would never know the truth. I traced back the logs, pulled up older versions, and compared them. The pattern was the same, the phrasing, the structure. It was all too familiar. My father didn't just approve the fake message. He wrote it. He'd rewritten the log to mislead the team, to make the strike look justified when it wasn't. For leverage, for access, for control. It was all about control. I slammed the folder closed, feeling the weight of it sink into my chest. This wasn't the first time he'd done something like this. It wasn't the first time he'd manipulated data, buried the truth, or used people as pawns in his games. This time, though, the cost was too high. Too many lives lost. I felt sick. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't an oversight. This was calculated. He had sacrificed people for his own agenda, and that's the kind of thing you can't walk away from. I stood up, the folder still in my hands. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do with this. What could I even do? But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let it slide. Not this time. My father's actions had just sealed his fate, and now it was time for me to make sure the rest of the world knew what he had done. I didn't go to the media. I didn't want the flash of cameras, the public spectacle. I walked straight to the general's office, flash drive in hand, the file locked tight in my grip. The door opened without a word, and I stepped inside. The general didn't waste time. He didn't ask for an explanation. He just took the drive from me and inserted it into his terminal, his eyes scanning each line, each timestamp, his face unreadable. He didn't speak for a long moment. The silence was thick, like he was measuring the weight of every word I had just handed him. Finally, he tapped his fingers on the desk, the sound sharp and deliberate, like he was choosing his words carefully. "Do you want scandal or justice?" he asked. I didn't have to think about it. Scandal would have been messy. It would have been a circus. Everyone would have gotten their pound of flesh, and my father would have gone down in flames with everyone watching. But I wasn't after that. Justice, quiet but permanent. He didn't flinch. He just nodded and slid the flash drive into a drawer, locking it away. A few days later, they opened a sealed review. No cameras, no press, just the people who needed to know. The Article 32 hearing was a quiet affair, the kind of thing that no one talked about unless you were inside the room. My father's actions were laid out, every line of code, every lie. He couldn't deny it. He wouldn't. The result was inevitable. They stripped him of his clearance and his position. There were no dramatic speeches, no angry confrontations. It was a quiet execution of what had to be done, the kind of justice that doesn't need a spotlight. My father would never face headlines. He would never stand trial in front of the world, but the consequences would follow him. He'd be left with nothing. No power, no control. He'd have to live with it, just like I had to. I didn't cry when I walked out of the hearing. I didn't feel relief either. What happened in that room wasn't for me. It wasn't about me. It was about making sure that what had happened wasn't buried again. But as I walked out into the cool air, the weight lifted. I hadn't realized how heavy it had been until it was gone. For the first time in a long time, I walked home lighter. And for the first time in even longer, I could hear the quiet. It wasn't the silence of being ignored, of being overlooked. It was a silence of something finally set right. Now, I teach machine translation at a community college outside Baltimore, room 202, 4 days a week. It's not glamorous. It's not high stakes, but it's enough. I don't tell them about my father. I don't mention the war room, the tech failures, or the lives lost. I don't need to. They don't need to know any of it. What I teach them is the importance of context. What happens when you misread stand down as stand by? What happens when you don't pay attention to the smallest details, when you let the machine decide for you without thinking about what it means? I write code the old way, by hand on the whiteboard. I make them spot the differences between caution and command, between the words that mean everything and the ones that don't. They catch on quickly, like I knew they would. One day, a student raised his hand, looking confused. "Did you ever save a life with this?" he asked. It wasn't the first time someone had asked something like that, but something about his face, the sincerity, made me pause. I nodded. "Yes, a boy with a radio, and maybe one or two more who'll never know my name." He blinked, then nodded, like he understood. He didn't ask more. We moved on. But I could see it in his eyes, the weight of what that simple answer carried. When class ended, I packed up my things and walked home under the old streetlights, not as Orpheus, not as anyone special, just someone who once chose the right word in time. And in that moment, I realized that was enough.